And I've spontaneously grabbed by a news broadcast this morning to speak about. Basically, I've summarized it as like quantity of learning, this obsession with um, uh, measuring our learning, measuring our kids' learning, measuring everything about the educational journey. Um, Yeah, it was something that I heard on the news this morning. I heard on a media broadcast about what the government's doing, and more content about extending the school day. The amount of days that this generation have missed of school. And of course, I understand all of this. I understand the concern about education post-pandemic. I don't want to lose sight of where we were at before the pandemic. And for me, I remember when the pandemic first hit, I was delighted for many teenagers that they could have a break from school. So I just want to speak up really directly about that. That just because we've had a pandemic doesn't mean we suddenly now all bow down to the value of days in school. I know what feels like a whole generation for whom there is, quite often very little value in a day in school. Of course, there are others for whom there is great value in a day in school, and that's kind of my passion area, is how to serve everybody. Were I to get into schooling systems or policy, that would be a major challenge and very exciting one too. But yeah, quantity of learning. Just I wanted to speak to this group about just to flag up our obsession with these measurable, tangible, kind of hard results in something as abstract as learning. So, in a way, for me, quantity of learning, like what even is that? How do you quantify learning? How do you measure learning? And so I'm so fascinated and devoted to quality of learning. And it's something that I've realized from hearing this news broadcast, how much I place the emphasis in a completely different place to the measurables. So, we measure learning, obviously with grades, and uh, before grades, maybe in our parenting styles, we might measure it in like reward charts, that kind of thing where you can measure um, how many times your kids done some good behavior or whatever it might be. We also measure in school, like with time. This is the one that really triggered me: the length of days in schools, the number of missed days this year. We also definitely, in my work with teenagers, do this with we all have that in our heads of like, how many hours was I studying for, or how many hours I did the longest work day, 16 hours of work or whatever it might be. 10 hours in the library. I remember this from my own experience in university, thinking, wow, I was in the library. But really, the truth was that I was in the library for 10 hours. It wasn't the same thing as I'd done 10 hours of work. So, yeah, just funny and also important for us to recognize this. Number of hours that we've been studying, working, you can see the connection there as well, that we carry this into our adult lives. Then we quantify like that. We look back and go, how long have I been doing this for? But really, we need to start evolving into a different way of looking at what's actually productive. What's the result? What have we actually achieved? um, what did that quantity of time and maybe effort. Effort's another thing that we kind of measure. Um, it is intangible, but we're obsessed with recognizing other people's effort and our own effort. And in a way, it is like a byword for suffering in many cases. I do understand the value of empowered effort, if you like, but the other kind of effort, I'm putting my emphasis much more in relaxation for the young people that I work with, and for myself, you know, as a platform for excellence and for learning. We also measure, yeah, volume. Another thing that's come up, teaching essay writing. Wow. It's taken me a long time with many students to try and convince them not to just fill up the page. You know, most GCSE students, maybe this is moving on a little bit, but 10 years ago, every GCSE English student I met, you really had to work on them to convince them that their job was they needed to bring more quality to it than just filling up. They were obsessed with filling up 2 pages. How long's it got to be? First of all, how long's it got to be? That's the first question. You know, when you're facing an essay question, every student in the land seems to just say, how long's it got to be? And then they're just squeezing out the words, you know, trying to like meet the 1.5 page mark. And then like, phew. The examiner's then going to look at it and think, yeah, this student can write because there's a page and a half's worth bigger writing, you know, just absolute madness. So that's an insight into kind of how crazy and how much we can overlook what's really meant to be happening in learning through the lens of essay writing for exams. And also, wow, for maths, speed. Maths in classrooms, fastest hand in the air first wins. You know, that's the one that's like the most impressive. Quick answers. You know, this has been an absolute disease for young mathematicians to feel under pressure, to be quick. You know, I've seen countless students one-to-one with me with no pressure whatsoever. I work very hard to create an atmosphere that is super relaxed, safe, warm, friendly, open. I've seen countless students piling the pressure on themselves to answer, and I'm sure maybe many of us can relate to this ourselves, piling the pressure on themselves to answer a question and literally speaking fluent kind of negativity in the process, trying to answer a maths question and just going, oh, I should know this. Oh, this is ridiculous. Wow, what's wrong with me? You know, like it pours out. It just pours out. And I mean, I waste no I waste no opportunity to just go, whoa, 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 whoa. We have all the time. We have all the time in the world. There is like, that is pure self-destruction and suffering. Give yourself a break. Wow, these things do take time, you know. Give yourself a millisecond more, or give yourself, let's be realistic, give yourself, it could be a millisecond. Let's give yourself 3 seconds more. You know, take 3 seconds now of complete relaxation and think about it, you know, just think about what is 7 minus 4, you know. And this might be a 15-year-old, you know, it just totally depends. They might not have those solid foundations of times tables and arithmetic. So, you know, let's take the time, really figure it out. And along with one of my other great loves and in a way insights with how people function, making sure you then double check, you know, like with maths, not being so obsessed with speed and the measurement of speed of response, to not then just get the answer, okay, we're thinking that 7 minus 4 is 3, like, is it, you know? Look at it in a different way, like approach that calculation in a way that's from another angle, if you like, and just be sure before you then proceed. Now, this is all kind of related to the same thing, like this way of learning, which is open, like time rich, relaxed, you know, enjoyable, then starts to become a possibility, you know. Yes, there can be some enjoyment from like adrenaline sports sort of maths. I get that, but as a culture, it has been such a disservice to a generation of mathematicians to be competing and rushing, getting it as quickly as they can, and also being rewarded sometimes for you know, 60% papers. Like if you understand a topic, you should get 100%. The standard is 100%. And so what you're working with as a maths teacher, what I'm working with as a maths teacher, is to empower young mathematicians to really know a topic. And when they know a topic, not to be slapdash, seat of their pants, flying through the questions and getting 40% wrong. Like, no, like every single question should be right. And you know, I'm obviously not saying that from a standpoint of increasing the pressure and whatever. It's a loving service to young people to say, you know, you have to deal with your monkey mind, being a bit human. You know, we are full of human error. So then when we're doing maths, we need to be careful. That's the challenge. That's one of the great joys of maths, is that we really train ourselves to be right in spite of the fact that we're not a calculator, we're not a computer. You know, we can see things in all kinds of different ways. We have an incredibly high powered intelligence, and that's great for maths, and also that's a real hindrance. You know, you can just flash through the question, read it completely wrong, but all of it in a way is comes down to, well, pace is one serious consideration for how we work, and the pressure of needing to measure how quickly we do something, feeling like the fastest is best, has just been awful for many of us, maybe, and certainly this generation that I've been teaching the last 20 years. And of course, the other way that we measure things is the national curriculum. So yeah, catching up, needing to be at a certain level to match, you know, your year group and all that kind of stuff, which also everyone develops a completely different in completely different ways. You know, you can follow the trends of how people develop, roughly what age they might want to take on a particular concept, but it's obvious that and you will know it in your own experience with your own children, that, you know, kids take on different things and are open to different new concepts, new stages of development at different times. So the national curriculum is okay as a kind of yardstick. You know, I don't mind it having like a kind of norm, but you know, we know how destructive that can be in other areas of society as well, having norms that we all apparently need to adhere to. So yeah, anyway, more measuring. So lots of measuring, and the quantity thing just really ticked me off, if that's the right expression, this morning. I really put a lot of my emphasis as an educator on the other end of the spectrum: what's immeasurable, what's intangible. The soft results are in many cases the most profound results. And I've written down just a bunch of things here. The glow of the reward in deep learning. How about that for an immeasurable result? The power of conviction in life purpose and meaning. So, you know, when I'm teaching English and maths, this is kind of that's what I'm mostly focused on. I want that deep, long-term, 20 years down the line, resonating results from the particular question that we're facing, from the type of learning that we're doing, and learning which, again, as everyone knows, should go in all kinds of different directions and be pretty freestyling whilst being held within a plan, you know, an actual structure for developing understanding in maths or any other subject. The joy of human heart connection. Yeah, I'm just chucking out a load of things that we know as parents are so valuable. The reassurance in our own capabilities and our own acceptance by another, who could be our teacher or our parent or our peer. The empowerment of complete trust and love between two adults. That's a good summary of a teaching relationship, a really good one. Yeah, and the freedom to choose what you want to do and when. I mean, you know, the immeasurable qualities are like confidence, you know, just confidence alone, that single word, wow. You know, how to account for that in this measuring obsessed society and school system. Deep inner self, like real deep inner self-confidence, on the back of a vehicle of learning a subject, or just in a non-academic kind of way. So yeah, for me, the offset to quantity, and just good to be aware of this, I'd say, going into the 2020s, about this obsession with quantity. Sometimes it can be very frightening for parents to feel like our children are behind, or that they've missed all of this time of of well, it's really just what they've actually missed is time being in school. They haven't necessarily missed learning. I don't think you can ever stop learning in life. Like, that's just how life presents itself. Now, of course, every day is full of learning, whether you're in school and out of school. And my feeling when the pandemic did first strike was of relief for many people to be able to learn in a different way than going to school. But of course, there's no extreme. I do understand that there's also great merits and benefits with all of these subjects when they're learnt in the right way. So the right way for me, the vehicles for real learning that I set out to achieve are relating to atmosphere, creating the right atmosphere, like I mentioned, safety. This is the breakdown of atmosphere: safety, warmth, friendliness, openness. You know, a place and an atmosphere where it's just pleasant to be, and a culture of gratitude, love and respect, just a basic culture of gratitude, love and respect. Yeah. And then a mentorship role, a mentorship relationship, which is like companionship. It's really like being, as close in as a young person wants you to be with them. A relationship based on trust, empowerment, again, respect and openness. And another huge element of quality learning is to do with choice. Now, this one just choice hung around in my 20s and 30s. Just the concept of it, I was like, wow, this is one of the biggest problems in our education system, is the lack of choice. It's just no one's asking these kids if they even want to go to school. There isn't the option to not go to school. And so having the potential as I can as an independent educator to open up choice has been so profound. You know, when someone chooses what they're going to learn, the way they then learn that is wholly different to how they're supposedly learning when they haven't had any choice in that. So it could be expressed also as engagement. Just, you know, when a child chooses their own activity of any kind, when they have their own idea about what they want to do of any kind, academic, non-academic, you can see them. They're just like, but burning to fulfill that vision and wanting to pursue that path. And you know, we all know what it can look like when the opposite is the case. It's just desperate when there is not that choice, when there is the coercion to do something which they just have ever less interest and respect for in subject terms. So yeah, choice really does. It's also called self-direction. So yeah, it brings about self-direction when there is a choice, and brings about a far greater quality of learning. So that's kind of what I'm wanting to speak to today. And yeah, purpose, like knowing this is also a debate I often have one-to-one with students, which I'd like to really open up beyond that. But it's fascinating to have the debate of purpose with young people. Why study this stuff? Like, it isn't pointless, needless, just a complete joke. Wow, why do we study all this stuff? That would be kind of easy. We could just bin the whole thing and go, let's not learn anything. But that's really, I mean, it's obvious to me that that's not the way to go. So it's really been a fascinating journey for me to find with young people, to find the purpose, of learning all of this stuff, and to have that discussion with them so that they can become more aware of what each subject and what the schooling system can give them, wherever they go to school, and whatever the culture's like there, however terrible their teacher might be or whatever it might be, there's just the purpose in learning needs to be made clear, and the potential for being able to take responsibility for that as an individual learner needs to be made clear too. And yeah, that's also something which, once there's a purpose behind it and you understand that you're not just gunning for grades and getting them so that you can then survive in some weird way in this life, or even have a life. I was speaking to one parent whose older daughter said about her brother, you know, like he's got a, like, he's at a point where we weren't sure if he was going to get his 5 GCSEs. You know, he's got to get his 5 GCSEs. If he doesn't get his 5 GCSEs, then, you know, dot, 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 you know, like, it's like, and this is an awesome, amazing young man, just ripped with so much potential and talent and drive and self-leadership and skills, massively blessed with, well, he has developed his own skills. And so, you know, next to 5 GCSEs, I'm sorry, he's towering above 5 unwanted, lackluster GCSEs. But still, there was this sense of, if he doesn't get them, then like life's going to be denied him in some ways, or there is going to be no future, and he'll be like an outcast, you know. And this thinking really runs deep. It runs deep in our society. It runs deep in all of us. We can all relate to that. I can relate to that sense of like the fear of someone not having that in place, these 5 skills. And yeah, like I say, I really do see the purpose of those skills when taken on in the right way and when learnt in the right way. I do understand why our education system is exactly like it is, however much it's ripe for great change. Yeah, and I did also want to talk a bit about the practical teaching tips for maths and English. I've touched on them a little bit already, just with the students I work with. You know, really the capacity to settle down and open up to a subject. I try and reveal the subject in that way of just like it's open exploration. There's nothing to be scared of. There's also, you know, I sometimes need to work quite hard to just reframe what that is, that maths or schoolwork is not something to be outright disrespected. Like, because usually some of the teenagers that I work with, there is a lingering sense of that, if not an absolutely overt sense of that this is like what we should not be doing. If you're a self-respecting teenager, why would you get down with this stuff that so countless adults have forced down your throat? To put it bluntly. So I have to kind of unwind that and go, listen, you know, in a way, I'm sorry for your experience, deeply sorry for it. I relate to it. But you know, this is like, this can be playtime as well. And you really do bury yourself and limit yourself if you continue to just wage a war against it, be closed to all of learning, academic learning. Because, well, for one thing, that's what you're doing, unless you're going to leave school and do something else, which I would wholly support if you have the self-leadership to survive that and do that. Great. But, you know, so it's just, yeah, rebuilding their trust also of the subject materials, that these are things that really can nourish them, and showing them the joy of just settling down, not having to rush, no stress, and just using our minds in this incredible way that maths demands and stimulates. And same with English, of course, same with reading and with writing, and just to be open to the the true reward of doing that in the moment. Never mind the reward of the grade, just like how can this nourish an otherwise, you know, kind of pretty wishy-washy lifestyle, like for a teenager, if there's not much nourishment going on there, then it all ends up in quite kind of flat, weird places. You end up, just if you're, yeah, I don't really want to say where you end up necessarily. It sounds very doomy and gloomy, but we all have this capacity mentally and physically. And my feeling is that we need to use it. Otherwise, we become frustrated, to put it in a simple way. So with young people, that's what I tell them, that if the reason it's frustrating, actually, if you dumb down on all these subjects and you spend your intelligence in kind of just quite wishy-washy ways, you are really primed to be developing yourself in this way in your childhood, learning and just seeing your capacity, testing yourself out in a good way. So yeah, and specifically with maths, I mean, there's a load of things that maybe aren't for today. I've been talking long enough, but briefly or in summary, many of the students I work with, they just need that reassurance to kind of read the questions slowly, read it carefully. So many read it wrong because they're rushing, and that's just a horrible lifestyle, never mind an ineffective way to do maths. Writing down your calculations so you don't have to think them through and then lose track and get it wrong, and that's a taxation on the brain. So I'm just writing down, again, these are like all the things teachers have tried to teach for at least 150 years. Writing down your working, it's otherwise known as, but I approach that from a very different perspective, where it's just an easier, more effective, more efficient, more relaxed way of proceeding through a question and getting it right. So yeah, and similarly having the natural safety checks in place for the answers, like I said, with 7 minus 4, just looking at it from a different angle, seeing, am I right? Taking that moment, and again, it's to do with winding down the pace, taking that moment to just go like, is that right? And in the right atmosphere, that's fun to do, and a student will do that because they're not worried about it, stressed about the time, or self-conscious, and all these other things that can disrupt that process, that beautiful process. Yeah, great. And then yeah, with English, same thing I've talked about with reading, just reading for immersion, reading set texts for complete immersion. Now, this is a trick that students do need to learn because it's tough. When it has been forced down your throat, so to speak, it is tough to then embrace a book because, you're full of resentment for whoever it might be, parents, teachers, society, the school system, whatever it might be. But so if you can flick the switch and grab that maturity and have that support to actually immerse yourself in the book that you have to read, then wow, that's freedom in that subject. That opens the whole thing up. So when I encourage students, even when they're reading an English language paper and it's an article or it's whatever, a comprehension exercise or something for them to analyze the language or structure of or something, same thing. I really encourage them to read for complete enjoyment. Immersion, enjoyment, synonymous. Just totally get into it. Again, no time pressure. If it's an exam and they've got 10 minutes or 15 minutes when they're meant to have read 2 passages, I just say, wow, just kick back and read at whatever pace is most pleasurable for you. Read them both. And take 20 minutes, just make sure you've read them fully and got every bit of goodness out of that piece of writing, as if there are no questions, and then go to the questions and you'll have all the answers, relative to someone who's whipped through it or read the questions first and then gone like, I mean, this is just insane, reading the questions first and then reading the passage. Again, I get it, full sympathy for everyone who's working that hard, but it's a lifetime of suffering and it's learning devoid of meaning. So yeah, I do understand it, and I sympathize, of course. Like, there's no judgment of people here, but yeah, it's a nuts way of doing things. Yeah, and also trusting your mind, learning to trust that your mind is going to filter out reading something. If you slip into that immersion, you know, your mind is going to produce the answers to the questions that you need. That's that our minds naturally do that, prompt us. If we can learn to harness that power and sit and think and just reflect back on what we've just read, or turn over a question in our minds, if it's an essay writing question, to formulate our thoughts. You know, this is also a skill and a capacity that is sorely under developed in this generation of young people. It's not role modeled by adults to them, how to be relaxed and composed and think like that. And the poor schooling system, I just have hammered it today, but you know, there's not that spaciousness and openness and emphasis on quality of thought, particularly in our grade driven social school system. So yeah, I love to emphasize that, just the power of 5 minutes of thought, 10 minutes of thought, and to read an essay question and to really just then do that process, formulate those ideas, collect direct, like head-on responses to that question. Read the question over and over and over, like, what would I say to that? Bam. One worders. My plans, the plans I like to encourage students to write, they're one worders. Like each point is one word, maybe two. I like the whole plan to be about 20 words maximum. You know, and those are the key, that's the key argument. You ask this question, well, it's because of this, 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 and this. Like that's, and I just, for some reason, I've always found that just thrilling, totally thrilling to receive a very complex challenge like an essay question, and then to come back with real straight answers, no kind of filling the page with stuff you've heard in class that isn't relevant and shoving in a quote that's not relevant as well. None of that, just direct, bold answering of the question. Great. And then, yeah, from all of this, my last kind of note is about enjoyment. You know, all of this prompts enjoyment, the atmosphere, the right culture of learning, the mentorship, the closeness with the teacher, the choice in the first place. That really comes like before you even walk into the building, hopefully, but I mean, not in our society. Yeah, and the purpose, to clarify for young people what the purpose is, just to go into that with them, like, why do we do this? There's not enough to just say you just have to, and to keep this kind of sense of like you just have to because otherwise you won't have a future or a life. That's not true, and it's just of next to zero value to motivate true learning.